Welcome to Car Talk of the Week, the not weekly, not podcast, not about cars, but instead about driving around in video games discussing various art-adjacent topics. To start, we'll be driving laps around the highway loop of another golf game before continuing on to some other categories. I had planned to get away from video games for the topic of this episode, but my script on the backrooms, liminal spaces, Victorian architecture, and Jungian psychology perhaps unsurprisingly started to sprawl on me. So this week we're once again talking abstractly about finding meaning in video games, specifically the Beauvoirian existentialism and Sisyphusian futility represented in the art of speedrunning. The driving today will again be in another golf game, my current favorite game to do anything but golf in. Before getting into the exact topic of this episode, I'm going to self-indulgently share a piece of something I wrote a while back. It's a small part of a longer, less defined piece of prose about my personal search for meaning. This short iteration here served as the epilogue to a collection of short stories, essays, and poems I put together called Drowning in a Burning Attic, a glorified booklet distributed to barely a few dozen people before I shelved my attempts at self-publishing. This passage is parenthetically titled Decay, or a rambling prelude to an ever-growing collection of broken lenses. I step outside and I feel the decay, creeping up behind me from an unknown direction, like another dimension. It's time. A collection of lenses. I wasted my youth looking for meaning, searching for the right lens that makes everything fall into place. But it's an illusion. There isn't one. The day you truly believe that is the day you are free. Imagine the arrogance of thinking the blurriness we're all born into can be sharpened with just the right combination of conceptual pieces. Like there's this big vault of meaning, and there's some exact series of words, chords, pictures, stories, emotions, experiences, frameworks, or something else just over the horizon that unlocks it all. And all of a sudden, you have a crystal clear view of it. The arrogance that in all human existence, nobody had ever done it until you came along. I see it now. It's all just decay. This episode is a not-so-researched, not-so-well-read version of a future video essay that will hopefully include more direct references to the ethics of ambiguity, the myth of Sisyphus, and the history of speedrunning. As it stands, I haven't read Simone de Beauvoir or Albert Camus in nearly a decade, and my knowledge of speedrunning is limited to a casual interest and occasional amateur participation. But this video is more about exploring vague connections and the seeds of themes than it is about anything concrete or worthy of a defensible thesis. Let's start with a couple of those poorly researched attempts at defining terms. Simone de Beauvoir was an early 20th century philosopher and social theorist who is maybe more well known for being a pioneer of feminist theory, but who also dabbled in being one of the founders of modern existentialism. I have vague memories of reading The Ethics of Ambiguity in a very introductory philosophy course, and of a younger me identifying with a good amount of it, even if I'd already grown cynically dissatisfied with some of the broader conclusions. In it, I remember Beauvoir very poignantly putting words to the empty, crushing meaninglessness of living in a post-Nietzschean godless world, and concluding that one must continuously manufacture their own meaning, like rungs on a ladder or steps on a staircase to climb one after another. In that repeated pursuit of arbitrarily constructed meaning, there emerges a true meaning in life. I personally haven't found myself entirely convinced of this life philosophy, and even find it vaguely capitalistic in some of its assumptions, but I do think, if nothing else, it can be a useful way to cope with the nature of you can't see me right now, but I'm gesturing around the vaguely everythingness of everything. Sometimes you need to make some arbitrary goalposts to chase around in your life to convince yourself it all matters. And that's a good thing. That's how I feel about speedrunning. The Myth of Sisyphus is another book I have vague memories of reading but limited recall of the specifics for. I am almost certain that I could very nearly imagine Sisyphus happy, but for the life of me, I could never see Camus as anything but miserable. Each day, Sisyphus gets up, starts rolling that rock, and begins the long, arduous journey up the hill, knowing that by the end of the day, he'll be right where he'd been countless times before. Tired, broken, and embroiled in a sense of inevitable failure. However, there's a silver lining. A sense of joy to be found in the cycle, in the pursuit of a goal not for end rewards but for the pursuit itself. There's even comfort in the predictability. How great a luxury afforded to almost none of us to know our destined fate and have the opportunity to make peace. Why do we keep getting up, pushing that boulder, going up the hill, despite knowing where it all leads? Doesn't the certainty of futility inherently invalidate attempts to conjure purpose from existence? Maybe, but what else are you going to do? Let's push that rock around and find out.
Is someone trying to get salty?
What you're seeing now is gameplay footage from an unreleased version of a video game that's become my personal boulder of sorts in the last year or two. Not to claim sole ownership of it, I know I share it with at least one other collaborator who is responsible for the vast majority of this game's development, but it has been one of those projects that I can imagine spending the rest of my life on without ever feeling done. I'm sure it'll finish me before I finish it, if that makes any sense. It's called The Museum of You, the currently released version of which does include a level dedicated to the Myth of Sisyphus, and this gameplay you're seeing is a reworked version of that minigame. It features the music of my favorite Sisyphus-obsessed friend and artist, Brandon Schock, and is made up of an unending tower spiraling into the void. You push the rock until you can't anymore. If you lose it, you have to start over, or worse, stand around with nothing to occupy yourself with. Let's see how fast we can do laps.
Hello, I'm Brandon Schock. Today we'll be looking at the Myth of Sisyphus. Really quickly before we get started, when you think about that little man down there pushing a rock up a hill, do you imagine he's happy? The rock is heavy for me. The rock is heavy for me. The rock is heavy for me.
Inside a video game, a player's purpose is often synonymous with the game's narrative. Why play the game? To complete the clearly defined goals and experience the story as its creator intended, of course. Speedrunning is, in a way, a rebellion against this predefined meaning and narrative. In its purest, most simple form, it's completing the main storyline of a game as quickly as possible. It's not entirely impossible to still experience the narrative while speeding through, but it's decidedly not the intended experience. In more extreme examples, speedrunning completely disregards the main narrative and the intended experience in favor of abusing skips or glitches, or running categories far outside the main quests. For example, me, driving around in another golf game, or even me right now speedrunning this hastily constructed Sisyphus game. Speedrunning rejects constructed narratives, clearing the way for emergent narratives to replace them instead. And in the same way, it represents a rejection of cosmically decreed meaning in favor of a purpose we, the speedrunners, construct entirely on our own. The game's developer can't tell you what's important or how to play. Only you can define that for yourself. And if your goals look silly or pointless from the outside, don't let that discourage you from finding meaning in the relentless pursuit of that next fastest attempt. This game you're watching is one that very, very few people will ever play. This particular version of it, exactly nobody will play, outside of me. And I am certain that nobody will ever pursue it as a competitive speedrunning category. This obscurity calls into question why on earth I'm doing it. Speedrunning is a competitive endeavor, inherently communal and social in nature. Ever since the first prehistoric gamer turned to their friend to say, "I bet I can beat this faster than you," speedrunning has been defined by relationships between people. What then is the point of speedrunning something so lonely? For this video here, I suppose that's the answer. I'm doing these Sisyphus runs to make a point and share a perspective. But why have I been speedrunning various driving categories in another golf game? A title with a player base barely larger than that of my own entirely unknown high-concept video game, and one where the people who do play understandably focus on the golf jobs and tasks that make up the real game? I'm not sure, but I also can't stop. Perhaps it's the same thing driving me to develop my own unfinishable video game that I expect very few people besides me will ever play. In these speedruns, I've found a strange, surreal sense of meaning in creating and attempting various categories that I'm sure no one else will ever compete in or care about. It's a sort of meditative therapy at times. At others, a source of accomplishment and joy at improving on past attempts. It's repetitive, sure. Pointless, absolutely. But damn, if it isn't something to do. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. I think the alternative is to be resigned in defeat to the nature of our cold, unfeeling universe. And perhaps in imagining so, we can find a meaning that's not so arbitrary and ephemeral. Not that those would be the worst things for any meaning we did find to be. I think the practice of speedrunning has a lot to teach us with this particular aspect of existence, especially in the extremes of community and isolation. If Camus can find absurd beauty in the infinite suffering of our Greek protagonist, we too can find it in the repetitive pointlessness of speedrunning. Reject the preset notions of success that playing the game as intended would fulfill, and find the strange corners of the in-game world where completing a task as quickly as possible is the only narrative. There's always more ways to shave off time, always another exploit or optimization to discover, always another category to run. Whether it's your contribution to the collective efforts of the speedrunning community, or a solitary exercise in personal growth, there's meaning to be found here. What will you do with your time? This has been episode 2 of Car Talk of the Week. It's probably more nebulous and less direct than future installments will be, but represents an episode archetype I'd love to revisit from time to time. Abstract, rambling, vaguely pretentious attempts at being poetic or insightful, without having to concretely commit to saying anything substantive enough to be refuted. Maybe next week we'll tackle a topic in a more grounded way, though I certainly can't make any promises. Thanks for listening, and thanks for making this particular rock a little less lonely to push.
The main thing I wanted to ask was that whether you're viewing it as trying to be a more motif-driven piece, or like this concept-driven piece, or just sort of songs, or just sort of like a more sounds and sort of sonic textures-driven. You give it all you got till all you got is not enough, and then you're gone.